There's some reason why you've been thinking a lot about that one memory of yours. There's a reason for it. There's a reason why you're thinking about it a lot. But you have to ask yourself and have the patience to listen.
As I've been starting to confront my own relationship with memory, I've also noticed some inconsistencies within my family's narrative. One of the things my mom has always mentioned when she talks about the day Paul was killed was the weather. It's part of her story. That October of that year was an especially rainy and cold month, but that the 25th was suddenly warm and sunny.
I think it was a nice day. I think it had been raining and raining and raining all September and all October, like just pouring rain every night. But that day it was nice.
I never really thought much about it until I started doing research for this podcast and found out that there hadn't been much rain that month, and that day, the sky was overcast. Then when I asked my dad about identifying Paul's body at the morgue, he said this.
Yeah, I was the one who had to identify him. And we waited, and it's a long time afterwards. The morgue, it wasn't right after the accident. It was months later, from what I remember.
How could it be months later? He was buried 4 days later.
That's true. Why do I think it's that? It seems to me it was quite a bit later, but you're right. It couldn't have been.
It makes sense that my parents' memories have shifted over the past 30 years. But it also worries me. If I do recover memories of Paul, how will I be able to trust that they're real? There's another thing I've been noticing while talking to people about Paul these past few months. When someone brings up a story about him, it seems like it might be triggering one of my own memories. I find myself shutting down the conversation. Save this for later. When I have the mic on, I tell them. But the later never comes. I recently brought this up with my wife Katie over dinner, while our 5-year-old Stella was watching cartoons in the other room.
It's a weird thing because this whole thing is trying to get to know Paul better. But I find myself almost trying to shut it down in a way. It's something I push away. I think I need to work through why exactly I'm so reluctant to let these memories be jogged.
I mean, the obvious answer is because they're extremely painful. And it brings up a very painful time for you and your family where you don't want to revisit that.
No, but I think I'd agree with you if what I didn't remember was the trauma of it. Seeing my parents cry and but I remember that stuff. I remember the court case, I remember the funeral, I remember that. It's the good stuff I don't remember.
But that's almost worse to remember the good stuff because then you remember what you lost.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
What can I do now?
What can you do now?
Why don't you put yourself to bed? That'd be nice.
Give yourself a bath.
Okay, so you're expecting me to just drown in the water?
No. Don't drown, please.
Try
Not
to
tonight.
keep your head above water. But it is bath time.
No! No.
I think the first time I really came face to face with what I lost was when I started high school. Loyola, the same one as Paul. There were traces of him everywhere. My first day there also happened to be the school's first day in a new building. That morning, all the students gathered in the field next to the old campus, and we began a ceremonial walk to the new location, just across the street. I remember stepping off the curb at the crosswalk, the same step Paul had taken in one of his last moments. Paul's class was in their graduating year by then. They all knew who I was and went out of their way to make me feel special. Paul's picture hung in the halls, and an award presented each year in his honor was displayed right next to the main office. I remember one afternoon, sitting in class, when a voice blared through the intercom. "Would you please send Paul McKinnon down to the office?" The other kids all turned to me in shock. Alex, the voice said. Alex McKinnon. In a lot of ways, I felt like I was trying to live up to the ghost of Paul. Like I had to be doing something for two. In one of the boxes at my parents' house, I found some notes that Paul's classmates had written to us after he died. There are pages and pages of them, and they all say the same thing. Paul was one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Paul was always happy. He could even fail a test and smile. He was the kind of person who, just by stepping into the room, cheered everybody up. Everybody loved him. We're all going to miss him forever. He's not someone I'll easily forget. Everyone loved Paul. Of course they did. So did I. But it was starting to feel like he was being deified. Like people were remembering this perfect, idealized version of him. I remember one time just letting loose and telling my mom a bunch of Paul's secrets about his bad boy side. Like that he would sometimes smoke cigarettes and that he'd almost had sex once. I felt terrible as soon as I said it. But I think she was actually kind of happy to hear that stuff. That he had experienced more than she knew in his short life. Sometimes I wonder if the version of Paul that was being publicly remembered may have pushed out the real Paul. My Paul. Who I was starting to forget.
In your family, your parents were very involved in all the court proceedings. And so who was there, really, for you to talk about your experience with Paul? There wasn't anybody really talking to you about it, about the past and what he meant to you and what you're feeling about the loss of your brother.
Yeah.
And what is very helpful for children when there's been a traumatic experience, that every year, actually, it's very important to bring it all up because children have to revisit their feelings. A child sees the trauma in different ways as he grows. I'll just give you a little example from my own life. I lost my father when I was 2. Oh. Every time I must have called him or brought up his name or something, my mother must have cried because I learned very early on that made her sad. So nobody told me not to talk about it. But I stopped talking about it. By the time I got to about 8 or 9, when she started to say, well, maybe you want to know something about your father, I said, no, it's okay. No, I'm fine. So
you've been conditioned to kind of...
I'd been conditioned, and I knew that it upset her. And so I grew up never talking about it. And it was only when I was at university doing Psychology 101 or something, somebody said something about suppressed memories. I went back to my room that night, and I was just beside myself. And it brought out all these memories of him, when I was 2 years old, being on his shoulders and him walking around with me. And I thought, where did those all come from? And slowly I started to realize that I had never unpacked any of this stuff. So if you feel you can, the way to really go through memories, I'll guide you through it, but we have to go through it in lots of detail. That's the way memories start to hatch,
I'm in.
All right, so let's talk about the memory. And Alex, I want you to close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath. Try to remember the day. Remember what you can about the day. What kind of day was it that you went to have your hair cut?
I remember it must have been spring or summer because it was nice. And I really see him in the chair, like looking at him there and just being like, wow, he's big, like tall, I mean. And he just looks almost like the, this is going to sound terrible, but like the Lincoln Memorial. Like he just, in that, it just seems so big in that chair. And I was sitting there reading a magazine and like looking up at him. And I remember him being so friendly with the barber.
Oh.
Yeah.
What does that bring up for you?
I don't know. I think it just, because I think at the time, there was just probably, he's...
You just take a moment, Alex, and think about it,
I think there was probably a bit of jealousy, like a little bit of like, well, why isn't he nice to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was, though. It was just like, I was an annoying little brother, and I was always copying him.
But you see, you've got a feeling there because there's something you know about Paul. He could be very charming, could be very nice.
Yeah.
He was nice to the barber. But he could be tough on you sometimes, so...
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's touched you that he was a kind person.
This is a different thing, but there was another memory that just kind of popped into my head of this man, older guy in his, 80s or so, and he had just recently gone blind, and he couldn't cross the street. And I remember me and my brother going to school, like walking to school, and him, in grade 5 or something like that, walking this guy across the street.
Oh, that's very special too, isn't it? Yeah.
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 I can remember it so well. I can remember him helping the guy sit down on stairs after we had crossed, and yeah, I remember it so well.
What does it make you feel inside?
I don't know. I mean, a little bit lighter, to be honest. It's nice to kind of remember, to kind of see different parts of a memory that I didn't really allow myself to think of.
You see, that's what I want you to start building. One memory that you unpack will trigger others. Do you think you've had enough for today, Alex?
I think so.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.
On the next episode of Sorry About the Kid.
It was hard, and it still is hard for him to be static, because we keep changing and he doesn't as well. And I think that becomes a constant readjustment against his stillness.
So I am on my way to the hypnotherapist. Gonna be put under, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea what to expect from this, but I'm open to it. Sorry About the Kid is written and produced by me, Alex McKinnon, and Mira Burt-Wintonic. Editing and sound design by Mira Burt-Wintonic. Jeff Turner is our senior producer. Our theme music is by David Drury. S.K. Robert is our coordinating producer. Our associate producer is Caitlin Taylor. Our logo is by Mathilde Corbet. Arif Noorani is our executive producer. Follow Sorry About the Kid on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the show, it would mean a lot to us if you tell your friends about it or leave us a review. Thanks for listening.